Somewhere in your house right now, there's probably a piece of jewelry, a ring, a chain. Something made of metal that isn't really for survival. It doesn't cut, it doesn't build, it doesn't feed you. It just sits there meaning something. You've probably never asked where that instinct came from. The real answer is older and stranger than you'd guess. For most of human history, tools were made of stone. Sharp enough to cut, hard enough to last, and available almost everywhere. Then, around 7,000 years ago, something changed. People started pulling a strange reddish rock out of the ground, heating it until it softened, and shaping it into something stone could never become. Not sharper, not stronger at first, just different, shinier, rarer. And humans decided that difference mattered more than almost anything else they owned. This is the Copper Age, sometimes called the Chalcolithic, a strange in-between period. Nobody talks about the way they talk about the Stone Age or the Bronze Age. It doesn't have blockbuster movies. It doesn't have a clean, dramatic name. But it may be the moment something shifted permanently in how humans relate to each other. Not through better weapons, through better ways of showing off. In 1972, near the Bulgarian city of Varna, a construction worker accidentally uncovered a burial ground that would append what archaeologists thought they knew about early human society. Inside one grave, archaeologist Ivan Ivanov and his team found over 3 kilograms of gold objects, more gold than existed in the rest of the world combined at that point in history. Bracelets, a gold-covered scepter, ornaments sewn directly onto clothing. The body in that grave belonged to a man in his 40s. And here's the detail that should stop you: not every grave at Varna looked like this. Most graves nearby held almost nothing. Some held stone tools. A few held nothing more than the bones themselves. One man was buried like royalty. Dozens of others, buried a few feet away, were buried like nobody at all. Before Varna, many archaeologists assumed early farming societies were mostly equal, small communities sharing resources, without much distinction between rich and poor. Varna broke that assumption completely. Here was hard evidence, dated to roughly 4,600 BCE, that inequality, real, visible, buried with you forever inequality, existed thousands of years earlier than anyone had proven before. Someone in this community had more. And everyone around him knew it. Why coppers, though? Why did this particular metal become the marker of who mattered? Part of the answer is in how strange copper must have seemed. Stone is stone, you find it, you nap it, it's done. Copper ore looks like ordinary rock until someone builds a fire hot enough, over 1,000 degrees Celsius, to pull a molten, gleaming liquid metal out of solid stone. Archaeologist Miljana Radovajevic, who has studied early copper smelting sites in the Balkans including Belovod in modern Serbia, has argued that early metallurgy required specialized knowledge passed down carefully, controlled by whoever understood the process. That kind of knowledge doesn't spread evenly. It concentrates. And once something is rare, controlled, and difficult to fake, it becomes exactly the kind of thing status gets built on. Copper wasn't really replacing stone tools for cutting or farming. Stone remained better for most everyday jobs for a long time yet. What copper was replacing was something else entirely: the old ways people had of showing everyone around them where they stood. And once copper became something worth having, it started moving. Raw copper ore isn't found everywhere, so communities that wanted it had to trade for it, sometimes across hundreds of miles. Researchers studying the trade networks of southeastern Europe during this period have traced copper objects far from any known mining site, evidence of exchange routes stretching across the Balkans and into the Aegean. That single fact quietly rewrites what you might assume about these early societies. They weren't isolated villages, each inventing metallurgy on their own. They were connected, trading, watching what neighboring communities valued, and adjusting what they valued in response. Status, it turns out, has always been contagious. Once one community decided copper meant something, the idea didn't stay contained. You can see the same instinct, almost unchanged, in a body that has nothing to do with Varna at all. In 1991, hikers in the Erztal Alps found a mummified body preserved in ice for over 5,000 years. Researchers call him Ötzi. His equipment included a copper axe, and it wasn't just functional. It was clearly a symbol as much as a tool, one of the most valuable objects a person of his era could possess. Physical anthropologist Albert Zink, who has led much of the modern research on Ötzi's remains, has pointed out that a copper axe like his would have marked its owner as someone of real standing in his community, not just someone who happened to own a sharp object. Think about that for a second. Ötzi died alone in the mountains, likely fleeing some kind of conflict, an arrowhead still lodged in his shoulder when he was found. And even in what appears to have been his final, desperate hours, he was still carrying the one object that told anyone who found him exactly who he had been. This is the pattern the Copper Age quietly established, when you're still living inside of today. Long before money, before markets, before anything you'd recognize as an economy, humans had already discovered that owning something rare, difficult to produce, and impossible for just anyone to fake was a way to broadcast status without saying a word. Look at what you actually value today. Gold is still gold. A wedding ring still means something a plastic one doesn't, even though a good synthetic could probably look identical. A luxury watch tells time exactly as well as a cheap one, sometimes worse. None of that is really about function. It's about scarcity, difficulty, and the story an object tells about the person wearing it, which is precisely what that grave in Varna was already saying 66 centuries ago. Here's what makes the Copper Age stranger, though, the longer you sit with it. This wasn't a slow, gradual shift historians can point to one clear cause for. Communities that had likely been relatively flat in status for thousands of years suddenly show graves like Varna's, one person buried with more wealth than an entire village possessed collectively. Archaeologists still debate exactly why inequality crystallized when it did, whether it was about controlling scarce metal sources, controlling trade routes that carried copper across enormous distances, or something more social entirely, a shift in how power itself got imagined once a truly rare object existed to represent it. There's also a darker layer to this shift that's easy to miss if you only focus on the gold. Once some people had significantly more than others, they also had significantly more to lose, and significantly more reason to defend it. Some researchers studying settlements from this period point to increased evidence of fortification and conflict compared to earlier farming communities, as if the very existence of concentrated wealth created a new kind of danger that hadn't needed managing before. Ötzi himself, killed with an arrow to the shoulder while still carrying his valuable axe, might be one individual example of exactly this new and violent side effect of a world where some possessions were suddenly worth killing over. What isn't up for debate is that something changed, and it didn't change back. Bronze Age societies that came after inherited this same logic and expanded it. Elite burials got richer. Symbols of status got more elaborate. Fortified settlements became more common, not less. And by the time you reach recorded history, the idea that certain objects signal who's important, and that those objects are worth defending, was so deeply embedded that nobody even questioned it anymore. So the next time you look at a piece of jewelry sitting on your dresser, or notice which watch someone's wearing, or catch yourself wanting something specifically because it's rare, not because you need it, you're not experiencing something modern. You're running code written into human behavior around a fire in the Balkans, or in a workshop somewhere near Beloved 7,000 years ago, the moment someone first pulled a gleaming, useless, beautiful metal out of ordinary stone, and everyone around them understood instantly exactly what it meant. Somewhere in your house right now, there's probably a piece of jewelry. Now you know exactly why it's there.